Welcome everyone who joined this self-knowledge course conference. Today we will be looking at topic number 24, life and the level of being. The objective of this conference is for us to understand what a level of being is, what level of being we have at this moment, how we can modify or move to a higher level of being, and how transforming our level of being will lead us to transform our life. And if we want to transform our life, we must start by reflecting on it. Question ourselves, what is the true meaning of our existence? Who we are? Where do we come from? Where are we going? What do we live for? Why do we live? We must come to realize that we really lack a satisfactory answer to these transcendental questions, and that we have been content to lead our lives mechanically, pursuing subjective goals that will lead us to nothing transcendental. And this, due to ignorance of the true purpose of our existence. The worst of all is the difficult and strange situation in which we find ourselves. We ignore the secret of all our tragedies, and yet, we are convinced that we know everything. We must become reflective, so that we can become aware of our current state, of what the intrinsic causes of all our evils are, so that we understand that we have the power to transform our lives and to definitively escape suffering. People believe that we'll achieve happiness by having a lot of money, university degrees, a high social position, or an ideal physical appearance. And when we manage to obtain these things, we boast of being strong, but the reality is that deep down we are terribly weak. When a tragedy comes into our lives, a natural disaster, a business failure, a major loss, or a difficult illness, then we realize that we are terribly weak. Unfortunately, behind so many studies, good manners, and money, we well know that any stomachache makes us sad and that deep down we continue to be unhappy and miserable. We come to believe that we are great, we are important, we believe that we have the truth about everything. We fight in life to obtain what we think is what is important in life. A good partner, a good job, a beautiful family, fame, money, prestige. But it's only getting there to realize that we remain dissatisfied, in some cases even feeling miserable. Because even when the person has already found the long-awaited partner, they continue to suffer, because the partner was not what they expected. Even when the person gets the job that he thought would bring him happiness, he continues to suffer, because they demand too much at work, because the boss is difficult, because he hardly has time for himself anymore. Or we continue to be unhappy because we lost a family member, or the children don't behave correctly, or the partner cheated on us, or because now that I have fame, I have no privacy anymore. And so, no matter our circumstance, we remain unhappy and miserable, and we don't understand why. And all this is due to the decadence at our level of being. Although we have the false idea that as humanity we are evolving, it is only reading the world history to know that we are the same barbarians of yesteryear, and that instead of improving, we have gotten worse. We are in the era of greatest access to information, and at the same time in the era of greatest ignorance. Nobody bothers to investigate anymore. All these technological advances and greater access to information have served to turn us into lazier, and more lustful, greedy, and envious beings. As humanity, we have long fallen into a process of decline. And what happens is that external changes cannot lead us to an internal and spiritual advance. All humanity wants to change the world, but no one wants to change themselves. However, the transformation of the masses, of the people, is not possible if the individual, if each person is not transformed. The mass is the sum of the individuals. If today's society is what it is, suffers from all the evils it suffers, it is because within each of us, as individuals, we carry those same evils within us. But we prefer to complain about the corruption we see in others, while justifying our own internal corruption all the time. If we are part of this society, it is because we energetically vibrate with our environment. And we need to make a change in ourselves, We need to raise our level of being if we want to see real changes in our lives. And what is a level of being? Well, just as there are different social levels, there are also different levels of being. But a level of being is a moral level. It is what we are internally. And what we are internally has nothing to do with age, social level, level of education, or the level of beauty or fame that we have. Our level of being can be that of the drunk, that of the jealous, that of the depressive, that of the thief, of the violent one, etc. And that we will be internally, regardless of whether we are rich or poor, whether we are people with university studies, or without university studies. Regardless of whether we are famous people or people without any fame, or if we are young or old. What we are inside defines our level of being and is what attracts each of the circumstances of our life. A lustful person will always attract scenes, dramas and even tragedies of lasciviousness, in which he will find himself involved all the time. A drunk will attract drunks, and will always find himself in bars and canteens, etc. What will the usurer attract? The selfish person. How many problems? Prisons? Misfortunes? By law of attraction or law of correspondence, according to our level of being, we are always attracting some type of people and some type of circumstances into our lives. It is for this reason that what happened to us yesterday happens to us today, and will happen to us tomorrow. We will always repeat the same mistakes, and we do not learn the lessons of life. All things repeat themselves in our own lives. We say the same things, we do the same things, we regret the same things. This boring repetition of dramas, comedies and tragedies will continue as long as we carry within us the undesirable elements of anger, greed, lust, envy, pride, sloth, gluttony, etc. And as long as our level of being doesn't radically change, the repetition of all our miseries, dramas and misfortunes will continue. All things, all circumstances, that happen outside of us, on the stage of this world, are exclusively the reflection of what we carry inside. The exterior is the reflection of the interior. And when one changes internally and that change is radical, the external, life circumstances, change too. But it is necessary that we long for a true change, to get out of this boring routine, from this merely mechanistic, tiring life. If we really want a radical change, the first thing we must understand is that each of us is at this or that level of being. What is your level of being? Have you ever thought about that? It would not be possible to move to another level if you ignore the state you are in. If we don't know what defects within us keep us at our current level of being, living current situations of anxiety, sadness, conflicts, disappointments, economic problems, family problems, suffering, etc., we will not be able to eliminate them, and therefore, we will not be able to raise our level of being. To better understand the importance of raising our level of being, we can imagine a stairway that extends from bottom to top, vertically and with many steps. Unquestionably, we find ourselves on some of these steps. Downstairs, there will be people worse than us. Steps up, there will be people better than us. In this extraordinary vertical, in this wonderful stairway, it is clear that we can find all levels of being. Each person is different. There is also a horizontal line, which is that line of life. This horizontal line of life is related to time and years. It is on the horizontal line in which we are born, grow, marry, reproduce, grow old, and die. The personality develops in the horizontal line of life. The levels of being, the being itself is not of time, it has nothing to do with the horizontal line, he is within us, right now, on the vertical line. In the wonderful stairway, in the vertical, the concept of time does not fit. On the steps of such a scale, we can only find levels of being. A higher level of being is immediately above us from moment to moment. It is not in some remote horizontal future, but here and now, within ourselves, in the vertical line. The personality is born and dies in time, it is not the being is eternal. Since we are starting to understand that the only way to transform our life is by raising our level of being. Let's see how we will do it. The first thing will be to identify which level of being we are currently at. And we will do this by self-observing and reflecting on what we are attracting into our lives. What type of people and what circumstances are you always attracting into your life? There you must reflect on what defines the people around you. Everything you see in those around you, whether they are violent people, or envious, or lazy, or complaining, or they are greedy, manipulative, vicious people, etc. The fact that these types of people are always around you is because by the law of correspondence there is a psychological affinity. Therefore, there is your level of being. Those are the psychological defects that you must observe and eliminate, but from within yourself. Once you begin to identify and recognize your level of being, or your moral level, then a fervent desire must arise within you to want to change the life you have. So that this desire serves as an impulse to begin to eliminate all those psychological defects within you that keep you anchored in that level of being. It is very common for us to be attached to our current level of being. People often prefer to stay in suffering rather than venture outside their comfort zone. But if we do not break with those old patterns, with those stale ways of thinking and feeling, we will never be able to rise to higher levels of consciousness. The next thing will be to understand that there is only one place, and one time, in which we can raise our level of being, and that is the here and now. It is that critical point where the vertical and horizontal lines join to form a cross. Therefore, the possibility of change was not in any past moment, nor will it be in any future circumstance. But in maintaining ourselves in a constant state of self-observation, to observe and discover each of those psychological defects that keep us anchored in our current level of being. And so, eliminating them. Here and now, we can discover our defects of vice, violence, submission, fear, laziness, greed, envy, jealousy, resentment, sadness, attachment, self-pity, etc. And if we discover them, we have the wonderful opportunity to eliminate them, at this very moment, and to ascend a step in the level of being. Let's remember that a higher level of being is immediately above us from moment to moment. It is not in some remote horizontal future, but here and now, within ourselves, in the vertical. All our problems can be solved if we learn to modify our level of being. We must learn to see those two lines that converge within us from moment to moment. On the horizontal line, we will find life with all its daily situations, with all the people we have attracted into our lives. Here there is pain, suffering, debts, etc. In the vertical line, there is no past or future, there is only the here and now, and the possibility of ascending to increasingly higher levels of being, where we will be attracting situations and people that will contribute positively to our continuous inner development. The key is always in self-observation. For example, reflecting on your current level of being, you could find that you constantly face situations of fights or arguments with your partner. You could realize by reflecting on this, that this is a circumstance that has become quite recurring in your life, and that this is a situation that prevents you from feeling full and happy. You realize that you are stuck at that level of being and you want to change that life. Then you begin to make the effort to remain in a state of self-observation, monitoring your mind, your emotion, your words, and actions from moment to discover the psychological defects within you that act in that situation, and that are what are attracting that circumstance to your life. So, from a state of full self-observation, when a situation happens that causes the argument and the fight to begin, you make the effort not to become identified with the defects that begin to emerge in you. And if you remain observing yourself, you will be able to see when pride arises in your mind every time your partner complains to you, or blames you for something, how feelings of impatience arise, and you could observe how anger moves in your emotion. At that moment, thanks to having been living in the present, in self-observation, you can discover that your level of being is that of a proud and angry person. If you never realize this and if you don't change it, then you could spend your entire life having altercations over and over again with that and subsequent partners, without even realizing that you are attracting these situations. But now that you have discovered what your level of being is, you can change it. And how to do it? Refusing to let those negative ways of being started to manifest through you because of that situation, and making a conscious elimination of each of these defects. So, for each negative thought that arises, you ask the force of love of our consciousness to eliminate it. Mentally asking, Divine Mother, eliminate this defect from me. The same with every emotion of impatience, anger, resentment, etc. You ask your Divine Mother to eliminate all desire to shout, respond sarcastically, etc. And what is going to happen? That is, each of your negative ways of being has trapped a portion of your consciousness. By eliminating them, those sparks of consciousness will be released, and you will be able to act, without the conditioning of the ego, in a conscious way. You will have climbed a small step in the level of being. You will see that for there to be a fight, two people are needed, but if one of the two is consciously transcending that situation, then everything changes. And if you continue practicing this exercise from moment to moment, great changes will be generated within you. And as a consequence, big changes will be seen on the outside, since when there is an internal change, it begins to be reflected outside. As long as we continue to live in that mathematical point, that is the present moment, we can have the opportunity to raise our level of being. When any hard situation arises, then, by being self-observant, we can realize those negative ways of being within us that are what attract those circumstances, and we can eliminate them. Thus, climbing another step in our level of being. And so, life will be transformed. We will relate better with everyone, and we will stop attracting people who were related to our previous level of being, and we will stop attracting those circumstances that were related to our previous level of being. But there is a very important detail that we must consider, and this is not making the mistake of criticizing those who we consider to be at a lower level of being. Like someone who gives up a vice and dedicates himself to criticizing those who haven't found the strength to change their lives. Criticism is a total lack of understanding and leads us to lower our levels of being. If we really understand and eliminate a defect from within us, and we raise our level of being, we will understand how that psychological defect acts, and the ability it has to subdue a person's emotion and mind. Then, instead of criticizing others, the desire will be born within us to help them raise their level of being. And we do so by sharing with them the knowledge of the three factors for the revolution of consciousness, that are what make it possible for constant and conscious ascents to occur at our levels of being, and at the levels of consciousness. As we have seen, the basis for climbing each step on the ladder of the levels of being is given to us by psychological death. By eliminating from moment to moment each of our negative ways of being. Spiritual birth is what will give us height. Since through of suprasex, those sparks of consciousness released with death will be fused in our spine, transforming those levels of being into levels of consciousness. The levels of being will allow us to change our own life. The levels of consciousness are those that will bring us closer to our own being, to our inner God. And those levels of consciousness are seen in our spinal column. And the sacrifice for humanity is what will give us the impulse to rise faster into these levels of being, because the impulse to advance in this inner work is given by love. So, when we teach others how to change their lives, then, that love drives us to make this rise faster. And to finish this interesting topic, let's talk a little about psychological rebellion. We know that in moments when life becomes really complicated, it becomes difficult for people to remember themselves and to make the effort to observe themselves and transcend that situation. When, for example, we are fired from work, when a loved one has died, when our relationship has ended, our company has gone bankrupt, etc. In those moments it is difficult not to become identified with everything that is happening. However, it is in those moments when we must learn to be warriors. In those moments we must appeal to psychological rebellion and make the maximum effort not to identify ourselves. Because if we learn to see it, It is from the most difficult situations that we can rescue the most understanding and wisdom. And only through psychological rebellion can we get out of those circumstances faster. How is psychological rebellion practiced? Making an effort not to identify with life situations. Understanding that everything passes. That you have experienced very difficult situations before, and yet they have already passed. And likewise, everything, no matter how difficult it may seem, will pass. Enter into reflective meditation, make a logical confrontation that allows you to understand that this whole situation is going to pass, and that if you work on yourself, and solve that situation within yourself, eliminating the psychological defects that manifest in that circumstance, then the circumstance will pass more quickly, since, as there is an internal transformation, the exterior will be transformed. In this way, you will be transforming your mechanical reactions. If before we only knew how to react to negative circumstances with sadness, with anger, with hatred, with revenge, now we will be psychological rebels and act consciously. This conference is particularly important because it allows us to see that happiness appears when we understand that the circumstances of life are only a reflection of what we are internally. If you want to transform your life, do it from the present moment, learn to raise your level of being. Remember to leave in the comments any questions you have. I also invite you to the next topic of the course, in which we will talk about exotericism, pseudo-esotericism, and esotericism. A really important conference that will help us learn to differentiate between the types of knowledges that we receive, and we will learn to differentiate an esoteric school from a pseudo-esoteric school. In this we are going to understand what our current position in knowledge is, and when the experience of esoteric work really begins. Don't miss this interesting topic. Until the next conference.